Good afternoon, everybody. It's about time to go ahead and get started. I hope everyone's been enjoying themselves at whichever version of the business show you're at today. I know that there's several variations in different areas. My name is Sean Frederick. I'm a certified resilience coach. And today I'll be talking to you about preventing burnout and hopefully giving you a roadmap to improving your mental resilience. So why is this topic important? I'm sure that we all know, and let's just go by a show of hands. Who here knows somebody who's experienced burnout? Right? I think we all, to some extent, are experiencing burnout. It didn't start with COVID, but COVID certainly highlighted all the weaknesses and all the systems, and we've never recovered. For businesses, burnout is really important. For small and medium businesses, nearly 65% of all employees have reported that they've experienced burnout. For business owners, 60% of all business owners have reported feeling the impacts of burnout and high stress. Really making this an important topic for everybody that is currently an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur. We really have to address burnout because burnout ultimately leads to increased turnover, increased absenteeism, it decreases productivity, and it lessens workplace satisfaction. So these are all things that we're going to talk about today and hope to address. When we talk about burnout, it's kind of that thing that we all understand when we see it. And when we see the person in the office that's sort of checked out, that's just going through the motions, we understand that person is burnout. We may see the person that has high anxiety over every change and every decision, right? We've seen those people in the workplace. I know I have. When we see that, what is the cause? What's the root cause of burnout? What is burnout? Really, when we talk about burnout, we're talking about the impacts of sustained exposure to stress, right? That stress that doesn't go away, and that stress may not be completely contained within the workplace. We all have families, we have lives, we have relatives, we have events in our lives that have to be managed, and often we don't have control over everything in front of us. Over time, those things can wear on us. And without really being able to address those stressors in a meaningful way, then we find ourselves in burnout or worse. There's certainly, we want to prevent burnout, but burnout itself can be a precursor to other symptoms, other events in your life that are far worse. Depression, physical ailments, things that are really caused at its root by ongoing exposure to stress. So when we talk about burnout, the impact on motivation, again, I mentioned that person in the office that's just sort of checked out. If you need them to do something, it's, hey, I need you to do this, and you walk away. But again, that person, you check back in with them later in the day, they haven't dealt with it. You check back in with them again, they haven't dealt with it. And then you check back with them again, and then instead of responding, they have done it or they haven't done it, they have an overly responsive reaction to you asking a question, right? That's burnout. So stress. And when we talk about stress, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. Too much stress is how we get to burnout. Not being able to effectively manage our stress is how we get to burnout. When we talk about stress, that's a natural reaction that we have to events in our lives. And it exists for a great reason. Way back in our historical past, we needed stress to tell us, move, the saber-toothed cat was coming. Move, the flood was coming. It existed for a reason. There's that part of our brain, the amygdala, that all it does is take in our sensory responses. It takes in what we see, what we hear, what we touch, and it tries to make an instant judgment, threat or no threat. And if it senses threat, it throws us into the fight or flight mode. And that's where the cortisol comes from. That's where the adrenaline comes from. That's why we start breathing heavy. That's why we get flushed. It's all part of the natural system. But of course, we don't live in the historical past. We live in the modern world, and those threats that brain evolved to protect us from, for the most part, doesn't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. They're just different monsters in the world for us to deal with, and I fully acknowledge that. But for the most part, the things that cause us stress in our lives, the things that lead to burnout, are the things that are parts of normal life. It's getting the kids to school, to sports. It's dealing with the aging parents. It's dealing with the tight deadlines at work. It is budgetary constraints. It might be economic uncertainty. It might be political unrest. Combined, all of those things lead to increased stress, and over time, without things put in place to manage those, we end up in burnout. So, how do we manage stress effectively? Regular exercise, connections. We're going to talk about these specific topics and more, where we're going to talk about how do we get to building resilience to avoid burnout, and what are the coping strategies that we need. Now, to talk about these different strategies, we're going to have to dig deeper into what is resilience, and we're going to get there. We'll talk about, as the title of the talk suggests, we'll talk about how do we build a roadmap to get to resilience. And that's really what I want everyone to think about. In normal conversation, and again, by a show of hands, does this resonate with you? When you hear resilience, you instantly think about the story you heard about the athlete, the celebrity, the average person that was involved in a truly traumatic event or overcame a significant challenge. And in that conversation, you generally reflect on what that individual did to overcome that event and how they were able to persevere and move forward. Is that how you're used to having this conversation? That's not the conversation we're going to have. That's not the conversation. In fact, we want to change the narrative on how we talk about resilience, because resilience should be a proactive thing. If I were lifting weights and if I wanted to be stronger and did that by lifting weights, I wouldn't suddenly show up with muscles and then later just wonder how they got there. I would proactively take meaningful steps to get there, and that's what the roadmap is about, right? So let's talk. The one here that I'm not going to talk about, which I think is very important, that it's here on the slide, and hopefully if you're in the back, you can see it. But if not, I want to personally encourage everyone to set realistic boundaries. Realistic boundaries by itself will do more for preserving your mental capacity for resilience than almost anything else. It is okay to say no. No is a complete sentence, and no does not need to be justified. So let's talk about building that roadmap for resilience. What I would like to do is introduce a concept of really talking about 6 specific factors. And even here on this slide, they're sort of compressed. But what I want to talk about ultimately will be vision, composure, reasoning, health, tenacity, and last but not least, collaboration. and how each of these elements build on each other and allow you to create a personalized roadmap based on where you are today, on how you can improve your resilience. Is that okay? Does everybody like that idea? Seeing lots of nods? Okay. But again, we're going to talk about vision and direction. We'll talk about composure and reasoning. We'll talk about endurance and tenacity. And lastly, collaboration and teamwork. Each of these elements builds and supports each other to really make sure that you have a well-rounded position in being resilient to whatever may face you in life. So, I'm going to start by talking about vision, right? Vision drives everything. In your lives, I would ask each of you, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I want you to consider whether or not you have a personal North Star. Do you have that thing you want to accomplish in life, that thing that brings you joy, that you can always focus on? And what I mean by that is there will be a time, I've got to remember not to get too close to the speakers. There will be a time where we're faced with a challenge, where we're faced with limitations of resources, of time, of collaboration, and things just have to get done. And it's not going to be fun. Do you have that thing that you can reflect on and say, I'm on this stage because I want to help people be more resilient? Do you have what that thing is for you? That you, no matter what, no matter how bad things get, that you can always go back to that thing that you can draw strength from, that you can draw comfort from, that says, it's okay that I'm struggling right now because I'm doing this for the greater good of following this North Star. If you have that, then you have vision. And if you don't have that, it's perfectly okay. We can work on developing what a vision is. You can assess what are those things that are important to you. You can develop a vision, and your vision can change over time. Right? So, motivation through aligned goals. You know, it's been said many times, if you do what you're passionate about, you never work a day in your life. Now, I think almost everyone here would agree that statement is probably not completely true. Even if you're working in your passion, there are plenty of days that you work a lot. But aligning your goals, aligning your profession, aligning the body of work you do with your North Star makes dealing with those difficult challenges when they arise easier, right? Who here has a job where they've had to put something in place because of their role that they were absolutely against? To their core, it was something they didn't believe in. How did that make you feel? Anybody? Horrible. Because you didn't believe in it, yet you were putting it in place for others. And that's why alignment and vision matter, right? Because you're feeling horrible because of that stress response. Your body's trying to cope with what you're doing. Sustained growth and adaptability. If you're aligned with your vision, if you're working towards your vision, if your goals are aligned with your vision, then everything you're doing counts as growth, right? It's the little things, the building blocks you put in place that allow you to get to your end goal and follow that North Star. Feel free to shoo me out of the way if I'm blocking the slideshow. I see a couple of people are videoing it, and I don't want to get in the way of that. I'm just not a podium guy. So next I want to talk about composure. And I think what's really most important about composure is emotional awareness as well as emotional intelligence. And I'll explain why the two are equally important. When we talk about emotional awareness, when you're told that you have to deliver this news or start this new initiative that you're not aligned with, do you understand how you are going to react to this in the moment? Do you understand how you are outwardly projecting, conveying this news to others? It matters. Are you aware of your own emotional reactions? And that's important because your emotional reactions impact other people's emotional reactions. This is particularly important if you're a supervisor, a manager, a leader of any type, right? And that's where emotional intelligence comes into play. Really being able to understand how that message is being received when you deliver it. So again, these things are absolutely related. And in understanding where you are and building the appropriate skills to improve that, you become more resilient and you're better able to move forward in your work capacity as a leader. You're more able to manage the stressors of life and how they all come together sometimes all at once to really make difficult days for us all. Practice mindfulness. Now for me, I'll share every morning I start off with about 30 minutes of just nothing. I literally sit in a corner. I have a cup of coffee. I don't look at anything. I don't read in anything. I try to become a mushroom. And in that time, that's when I try to become mindful of where I am, what my mood is, what my energy level is, so that I can move forward for the day. Managing stress effectively. Again, maintaining your composure in stressful times. I'll give you a quick story. On January 20th of 2020, I was in New Orleans. I was getting ready to board a plane. It's worth noting I was the administrative officer for a local public health jurisdiction in Washington State, Snohomish Health District. I received a phone call while I was on vacation from the health officer, and he said, "Sean, sorry to bother you on vacation, but I need you in a meeting. I need you to go somewhere quiet. You can't tell anybody what you're doing. It's going to be the CDC, the state health department, and the epidemiologist from Washington State." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" "We just got confirmation we had the first case of COVID in the United States. January 20th, months before any of the shutdowns where you were." In that moment, I can tell you there was no such thing as composure. In fact, I remember it very clearly. My only thought was, and I still can't rationalize why, "Oh my God, I am so fired." As if I was somehow responsible. But again, emotional awareness, composure, critically important in being resilient. Reasoning. At some point, I had to think through that. I'm not going to get fired. If you work in public health, the pandemic is probably job security. Introspection and growth, right? Reasoning, working through the problems. Who here considers themselves a problem solver? Good, good. Lots of problem solvers. I have a ton of business questions for you after this, so everyone stay where you are because I have tons of work for everybody. Who understands this SEO thing? Anybody? Okay, all right. There we go. Resourcefulness and challenges. And we're going to talk about resources more later. But I want to ask the question. I just want to ask for an example of a resource. Anybody? Hmm? Let's just stay talking about the individual and what could be resources for the individual in solving a problem. Mother, father, great relations. Hmm? Technology. Any others? No supporters of the local library? Thank you. All right. Understanding where you can find resources to solve a problem, very important, right? It's part of reasoning and not allowing your emotional response to take over. Again, I talked about how each of these elements are going to build over time to allow you to create your own roadmap to be more resilient. Proactive planning. When I started in public health, which I'm not currently in public health, but when I was in public health, I was an emergency planner. And what I did all the time that completely infuriated my boss, my default answer to any issue, any problem was always the same thing. What's the worst thing that could happen? Right? And that truly was what I tried to identify. When a problem was presented, I tried to proactively think about what's the worst thing that could happen. And in doing that, right, that allows you to actually start to pre-process those scenarios, even if they haven't happened. And the beauty of that, the beauty of thinking ahead about what could happen, that pre-planning, that proactive planning, is that should that event actually happen, you already know the worst thing that could happen. And in knowing that, you actually begin to deregulate the amygdala in that stress response. Just because you hypothesized what that event could be and what those worst case scenarios could be. All right? Adaptation and flexibility. I think this goes without saying. In problem solving, sometimes you have to be creative, and sometimes you may need to adapt to new situations, new scenarios, new partnerships, possibly even the use of resources that you hadn't used before or considered before. I could tell you, I love using as a resource going back to my parents. And it's amazing how often I can give them a technical problem and they will have a completely unrelated, non-technical solution that may not be the answer I need, but it takes the thought in a completely different direction. Adaptability and flexibility, using your resources, problem solving, taking opportunity to grow. This is probably going to be a quick slide. I'm just joking. Every now and then I'll make some self-derogatory comments. This might be one of those. Sean has some work to do. But that's okay. I know it. I'm working on it. It's good. It's all good. It's going to be great. Quality of sleep. Sean does not need to work on that one. Sean is getting his. Right? You want to make sure you're getting a sufficient amount of sleep. Now, I know somewhere in this room, in one of these seats, there is someone that idolizes Bezos and all the other billionaires and how little they sleep. And if that works for you, I'm not telling you to change it. What I am saying is make sure that you get an adequate amount of sleep for you. That might be 4 hours. That might be 8 hours. If I don't interrupt my fiance, she'll sleep 9 hours every single day. Which is why I interrupt her, because that's just ridiculous. Balanced nutrition. Have a healthy diet. And I'm not a dietitian, so again, I'm not going to tell you what the healthy diet is. Make sure that if you're using the plate method, if you believe in the plate method, if you believe in the traditional pyramid, if you believe in keto, carnivore, whatever that appropriate diet is that works for you, I want you to make sure you're doing it. And lastly, regular exercise. So, why is health important? Now, I'll tell you why health is important for resilience, because we always talk about the mind and body separately. To be healthy allows the mind to function properly, right? And this is how it plays out. If we are not getting enough sleep at night, if we're not getting enough exercise, if we're not eating the right foods, then when we're faced with a stressful situation, we don't have the mental capacity to deal with it. We're tired and we're frustrated. And how dare this thing happen on the day I planned on going home early, right? And what ends up happening? If you don't get enough sleep, you're more likely to make a bad decision, right? We know this instinctively. We know it in regulatory requirements. It's why truck drivers have specific limitations on how long they can drive, because study after study have shown that without enough rest, you're going to make a bad decision. The same is true for us. So make sure that you are taking health into consideration. Oh my God, that time went fast. Tenacity. Tenacity is really about stick-to-itiveness and really pushing through, right? So motivation is inner fuel. Realistic optimism. You cannot be all things to all people all the time. Again, what I said in the beginning, what did I say was the single most important thing? Boundaries. Make sure you're setting boundaries. Resilience after setbacks. We talked about the North Star, making sure that we do what we need to do to follow that. Collaboration builds resilience. This talks about resources, coworkers, family, friends, technology, the library, history. It is rare. It is rare that there's something truly new in the world. Somewhere it's already happened, and there's probably a solution that you can lean on in solving your current problems. Support networks, confidence. Why is all of this important? Because higher resilience equals higher productivity. Higher resilience equals increased productivity along with an improved work environment. It results in decreased turnover and decreased absenteeism in your workforce. Helps avoid conflicts because everybody's in a better mood. I have a call to action for all of you as I get towards the end of this. Only 25 more slides to go. No one fell for it. Boost resilience together. Resilience is a team sport. Workshops, coaching are all methods. Change your team culture. Make resilience important because it is. Change the narrative. Make it a proactive conversation, not a reactive conversation. Remember, we become more resilient as we work towards becoming more resilient. Or, as I say as a quote, your resilience is a reflection of your preparation, not your struggle. So, again, I want to thank all of you for your time and your attention. Thank you for all of your responses and the engagement. I hope you're enjoying the show. I will be here tomorrow as well if you're here and you have additional questions. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day.